Hello, everybody. I have the one and only again with us today, Mr. John Mindermann, and he wrote a book called In Pursuit. And he has so many interesting stories to tell. I'm just immense with the charge that he gave to me with all the different stories that he has. So, Big Bad John, I call him that because he was a policeman, so you got to watch out, you know. We have a lot of fun with that.
We did.
And anyway, John, let's take off here. You were a policeman for how many years and what
I was a
transpired?
police officer for about 8 years after I graduated from college. And it was a very, very fascinating 8 years. I spent time walking a beat. I spent a lot of time patrolling in a radio car. I investigated accidents. I rode a motorcycle. I did plainclothes work. I also wrote the patrol procedure for the San Francisco Police Department and taught that course for the first time to police recruits. So I had a broad experience working in local policing before I became an FBI agent. And in the local policing, I became acquainted with a lot of community issues and a lot of issues which I was able to capitalize on. My knowledge of these issues I was able to capitalize on later in the FBI when I was assigned as an instructor and researcher in the behavioral science unit, the original behavioral science unit at the FBI Academy at Quantico. While I was in that unit, I developed a program for police officers involving police stress and crisis intervention. I wrote 3-unit courses, which I eventually taught in the area of the non-criminal role of the police. That is, how to interact with the ordinary problems, the community problems, which the patrol officer faces when he's out on patrol, when he's interacting with citizens in a variety of situations. And of course, the objective with crisis intervention is to take any situation which is volatile or potentially volatile, de-escalate it, calm it down, set the stage for calm, rational conversation to identify the problem. Once you identify the problem, then come up with a solution which doesn't involve arrest or incarceration. So what I focused on was to make the interaction calm, to make it effective, to make it so that the patrol officer could succeed in becoming more of a community resource rather than a police officer.
Right, and when you say the word stress in there, because you're trying to weigh this and that, and you've got your job to do. Maybe that person you're going to talk to, arrest or whatever, you're not sure it's right or not, and that's the right way to approach it. And I gotta have you take this one that I thought was great. You know, when the woman saved you. Let's go into that, and then I want to get into other stuff that are more current here. But tell us about that. I thought that was fascinating.
One of the problems that a uniformed officer continually faces is balancing community interaction. That is to say, treating the citizens with the utmost respect and in a way which generates respect and confidence in you as a police officer. At the same time, you have to recognize that your fundamental job is an enforcement job. So you're going to also be coming up and you're going to be coming against individuals who are hardcore, very dangerous criminals. So you're constantly doing a balancing act between do I need to be friendly? Do I need to be interactive? Do I need to let my guard down a little bit? Whoops, I need to put my guard up because maybe this person is somebody that I don't realize is a hardened criminal, maybe even wanted, and I don't even know that at the time I'm interacting with them in a community setting. It could be a restaurant, it could be a bar, it could be on a public street, it could be an apartment or a residence. So you have this kind of push and pull all the time. That creates an awful lot of personal stress on the officer because you're balancing contradictory expectations.
Now tell me about that incident that I was talking about, that woman saved you in some way.
It was the first time I had ever walked a beat. That is to say, physically walked a foot patrol in San Francisco in a downtown area called the Tenderloin, which was populated by a lot of people in lower level service occupations And at the same time, there were individuals there who had had trouble with the law, very serious trouble with the law. So you have this kind of vibrant mix of different personalities in this one neighborhood. Of course, I was working nights, midnight to 8 in the morning, 4 to 12. So I'm walking my beat, and the first tavern, the first bar that I come to is a place called The Gangway. Now, the Gangway in real life is a broad kind of platform which goes from a dock to a ship, where they bring the luggage up and they bring the large things up for a passenger ship. It's not where the passengers get on this narrow thing, it's a wide thing where they bring the luggage on.
And that's so the gangway, yeah.
Gangway, okay. So the Gangway is the title of this one particular bar. And as I walk into the bar, it's very close quarters, and I would walk to the rear of the bar, and the bartender would come back there and he'd have a conversation, how you doing, officer? And I'd say how things are going and blah, 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 and just kind of look around and kind of size up what's going on in the bar. Maybe there's 20, 25 people there, kind of see who's there and let them see me and let them see me interacting with the bartender. But as I slide by, the first lady who is standing with her back to the bar was very close quarters, so I was in maybe 6 to 10 to 12-inch proximity to her as I slid by her. And I heard her say in a barely audible voice, "It's a gun."
Wow.
And at the time I'm sliding by her, and I think I hear this, and I'm going, did I really hear that?
Wow.
Did she say, why would she say that? And at the time that's occurring, those seconds that that's occurring, I'm now in front of the next person who is a man, standing alongside her, a companion. And as I'm looking at him, we're making eye contact, and I thought, she said gun. Where are his hands? So I looked down toward his hands I was making eye contact towards him, and he was sliding his hand inside his suit coat, looking me straight in the eye, and I immediately put my left hand on top of his hand, and I felt not only his hand, but I felt the butt end of a .45 semi-automatic pistol, which turned out to be cocked and fully loaded. He was in the process.
So what did you do? When you felt that? What happened?
I grabbed, I secured the gun, and I looked him in the eye, and as hard a voice as I could, I said, "Don't move."
Wow.
And I pulled the gun out of his coat, and I held it to the side, and with my other hand, I grabbed him by the suit coat, and I spun him around, and I slammed him up against the bar, and I put him face down on the bar, and I had the gun in my right hand. And of course, then I'm thinking, what's the next move? Okay, because there's no training for a situation like that. So my next move was, and in those days, we didn't have pick radios. We had no communication with anybody. You had no radio at all when you walked. The only thing you had was a little brass key, and you had to find a police call box someplace to call in to get help.
Let me interrupt a second there. When you had that, and then go back to this, but when you felt that gun and you took it out, what were your thoughts after that? What could have happened there? What were you thinking?
My thoughts after that, immediately after that, were, oh my God, I dodged a very bad situation. And I've always thought about that situation. It's never, ever really fully left me, because if that woman, if that citizen had not said, "It's a gun," I would have gone right by him. I would have turned my back. Okay? And he, I believe, would have shot me in the rear of the head or the rear of the back. It turned out, after I took him into custody and we checked him out, he was a convicted murderer. He had been convicted of not murder, but the next one down is manslaughter. And he had done time in San Quentin. In fact, he was on parole from San Quentin
at that time
for manslaughter at that time.
God. Listen, I got to get on the phone and call that woman. What's her name?
That's right. Forevermore. But,
hey, lady, let us know how come you did it. What about going on there?
But, you know, it kind of raises an interesting point. I didn't know that woman. She didn't know me. She was his companion. Yet, when the chips were down and she had knowledge, what did she do? She shared the knowledge, and she saved my life. Okay, she saved my life. So when you're working as a police officer anywhere, you are dependent, absolutely dependent on the citizens, and you're dependent on your fellow officers to help you, to assist you, to protect you, to provide you with what you need to survive, okay? So one of the things that people don't realize is, you know, say, why do cops stick together? It seems that they always stick together.
Yeah.
Well, they do stick together
They need to.
because they're dependent upon one another. They're critically dependent on one another to save each other's life. Sometimes what the police don't think about is how dependent they are on the general citizenry to save their lives and to help them. And so that's a very positive aspect of interacting with citizens.
Yeah. Well, you know, gosh, you know, we could go on for 2 hours. I could have you on 2 hours and we'd have good conversations because what you have to say is so interesting. But we only have a half an hour. One of the things that I want you to talk about, kind of its current thing going on with the politics, the government, this and that, and you went through that Nixon situation way back. Now, let's get into that if you would, and then later we'll talk more about your police work too, but go ahead and tell us about that, what happened there.
Well, that was the Watergate case, and I was one of the 4 or 5 agents that worked the Watergate from the very first day to just about the end, 2.5 years later. I was on it for 2 years.
Wow.
So I had a very distinct impression of exactly what was going on with the president and with the president's entourage, those immediately close to him, such as Haldeman, Ehrlichman, all those people who kind of aided and abetted what he was doing in this particular case.
Yeah.
What this case brought me to realize is that the FBI has a very, very critical role in monitoring what a president does. That particular case established the precedent of the FBI investigating a president of the United States. And from that moment forward, from 1972 forward, it has always been kind of assumed that if something serious happened involving a president or a high official, the FBI would be involved. And to this day, of course, that is the case. We've recently had the lengthy investigation by the former director of the FBI, Mueller, with respect to our current president, Mr. Trump. So that investigation just culminated and went on for 22 months. Another long investigation involving 40 FBI agents doing the groundwork and doing the investigation. So in some respects, it was very much like the Watergate.
Yeah. Now, as you say, you know, similar to that, what kind of things do you see now in what's going on with our current president, you know, the Trump? And what could there be that you might know or others should know or whatever that would help the situation?
Yeah, I think what I would communicate or try to communicate to my fellow citizens based upon my experience in the Watergate case with Richard Nixon and what I've been able to observe with the current president, President Trump. And not picking on President Trump specifically, he happens to be in office now. But I would say this about anybody in the office of the president. Not only is it the job of the FBI to keep a watch on the president of the United States, it is the job of every American citizen to keep a watch on the president of the United States. You do not want to be assuming necessarily that the person who's president of the United States is necessarily acting in your behalf. So you want to be watchful, you want to be politely skeptical of what's going on. You want to be probing, you want to have information, and you want to voice your opinion, and you want to discuss things that are going on, and you want to question. So the message I would have is exactly that one. Be observant, be critical, be skeptical, talk to your fellow citizens, talk with people you respect, get involved in politics.
And if you think he may be right and this is a good path to follow, others may not think so, the other word might be supportive too, perhaps.
Absolutely. That works in your favor too. Be supportive. Step up and support your president. So it's not that you want to constantly be looking for negatives. It's just that you want to be watchful, you want to be involved, and you want to really take seriously your title of citizen of the United States. I think those of us who are native born assume a little bit too much. I think if you had to work for citizenship, like so many of our new citizens have to, I think maybe one might appreciate citizenship more.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's one of the things, you know, that it's brought up in the newspapers too, about what you're doing, what you're not doing. And it's great to think about these things and take your importance in this community, in this government, you know, of what you do. And this is the thing that I talked to you about, you know, where I talked about world peace. And this is one of the things I'm pushing. Some people kind of laugh, world peace, I got to laugh at that, you know. But you have to start somewhere, you know. And this is where I think, like, the kind of things you're doing, you work with people, you understand, supportive or skeptical or whatever it is. But being involved is a biggie. Go ahead.
It's absolutely huge, because when you look at other countries all over the world, other citizens in other countries have no chance to be involved at the level any ordinary citizen in the United States can be involved. So that gives each citizen in our country a world presence, a world voice that few citizens have. So we're all free to exercise that world voice. In other countries, many other countries, you're not free to exercise that voice. So you should consider taking advantage of that. Consider being a voice for freedom, personal rights, protection of women, all these kinds of major issues that are before us now.
Would you get into, this is really interesting too, because, you know, what you went through in the Nixon thing, you know, when all that happened. Again, as I asked you before, really, how more can you relate that to now? What could the president do, or what can we do?
Okay, what you need, what I learned from the Nixon affair, we the investigating line level agents, we were at the bottom. We were young guys, okay? But we had a task, and we had training, and we had a certain degree of independence and power. And we exercised that consistent with what the law gave us and what Bureau operational procedures gave us. At the same time, we were fighting internal battles. Besides the external battles we were fighting with the Nixon administration, we had internal battles within the FBI, where we were actually being harassed, threatened, and intimidated within the FBI from the highest levels. Our own acting director at the time, L. Patrick Gray, personally called us all in and threatened us personally, face to face. At the onset, within about 2 weeks of the onset of the investigation. So we knew we were under the gun from the beginning. See,
you say threatened you. In what way did he threaten you? What
he
was the word you used?
Presumed that some information that had shown up in the local Chicago papers, I believe it was the Chicago Tribune, that concerned the beginning of the investigation of the Watergate case, he presumed that that information was leaked by one of us. We did not leak any information. The information, in fact, was leaked by somebody in the upper echelons of the FBI. In all probability, it was the individual who was later identified as Deep Throat. Deep Throat, of course, was a very, very high official in the FBI who was feeding the information that we obtained in our secret investigations. He was feeding it to Woodward and Bernstein of the Washington Post, and it was appearing in the Washington Post a day or two after we generated the information through our investigation. So we were fighting a battle to get the information, and then we were fighting a battle within our own organization with our executives.
Oh my God, what did Deep Throat want to get out of this? Why did he do it? Did you ever come to a conclusion on that? Why he would
there's a couple of main theories. One of the theories is that he did it to enhance his personal stature, and that he was very disappointed that he was passed over. J. Edgar Hoover had died May the 2nd, 1972.
So he had a disappointment going on.
And he thought he was going to be the next director of the FBI, and it turned out Richard Nixon appointed somebody from outside the
Okay.
FBI, L. Patrick Gray, as the acting director,
Yeah.
and he passed over this individual. So one of the theories as to why he did that was that he was embittered and he wanted to get even.
Okay.
Okay. However, there's another theory, and I subscribe more to the second theory. The second theory is that there was a very positive thing that came about as a result of information being leaked to Woodward and Bernstein of the Washington Post. And that was concurrently with our investigation, or slightly after when we developed the information would appear in journalistic form on the front pages of the Washington Post, informing directly the American people that this was what was going
Okay.
on. So that gave us, the line level investigators, a certain amount of what's now referred to as shade and cover, because we needed support from the American public coming through the political process to keep us going, not be pushed aside
Yeah.
by the individuals in a political sense who wanted the thing shut down.
Yeah.
So
Well,
there
you
was
know,
a very positive
yeah.
thing that came out of the leaks.
What I kind of relate to this, you know, there are people now that know a lot, don't know a lot, and then it's coming like this Mueller report, you know, we expect, wow, big things are happen. No, nothing out of that Mueller report, you know.
Well, nothing so far.
So far.
So far, but we haven't
Okay.
seen, you know, we haven't seen the whole report.
Yeah.
We haven't had Mueller appear yet
Okay.
before any congressional committees.
Yeah.
It hasn't really been dug out and interpreted. There hasn't been any follow-up. There
Yeah.
could be a lot of follow-up to the Mueller report
Yeah.
too. So all these things remain to be played out,
And they're still coming out.
and we kind of come back to the overall unclean, unpredictable, in a way, American process.
Yeah.
This kind of amorphous democracy that we all exist in,
Yeah.
and we all kind of wonder about sometimes, but when you see it actually functioning and playing out, and the various currents intersecting and pushing it and pulling it and directing it, it's just a marvelous thing.
And that brings to my mind, like other countries, you say they don't have that priority of being able to speak out and what have you, and we have that. And in a sense, sometimes it's a pain in the patooties when they come out with stuff that is irrelevant, you know. But between that, you know, you still get a lot of relevant stuff, a lot of things that are important that come out, even though some things, my gosh, that's crazy, you know. But yet, it's not, you know. Things we put into it are meaningful, hopefully.
You stay with the unpredictable. You stay with the process. Let it flow. Have your input. Interpret it. Watch it. Marvel at it. And see where it takes us.
Yeah.
And it's going to be very, very fascinating, because we're going to have a lot of political pressure, different ways. We're going to have a lot of interpretation, and it's going to play out. I think it's going to be very similar in many aspects to the Watergate affair. That is to say, I'm not predicting, I'm not condemning at all President Trump, because so far there's absolutely nothing to indicate that he was involved in what the primary focus of the investigation apparently was. But we'll have to wait and see exactly what the subsequent inquiries show.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you know, we have a few minutes left here, and I sure want to get to some of the other stories. This is fantastic, you know, what we relate to from what you went through with the FBI and so forth, and what's going on now, you know. How much can we learn from that? That's one of my biggies here in this program.
Okay.
What can we learn from these things?
Well, we learned, as we were talking about, we learned that the citizen activist, okay, which is potentially every American citizen, okay, as opposed to some other country, the citizen activist is very, very important, okay, very important. One thing in these last minutes that we might touch upon, which is highly relevant in our country today, is an ongoing police controversy involving the use of force.
Right.
Specifically, the use of deadly force against individuals who, it turns out, are not necessarily armed.
Yeah.
The police at the time of the interaction consider them to be armed or interpret their actions to be threatening and use lethal force, so you wind up having a dead citizen,
Yeah, we got 5 minutes.
and you have an unarmed dead citizen and a police officer in difficulty because he shot an unarmed citizen.
Yeah.
Then you go through a process, a legal process, where the local prosecuting attorney will look at everything and usually decide the officer is not subject to prosecution because the officer legitimately thought his life was threatened at the moment he fired the pistol. Okay? That doesn't end the controversy, that begins it. That begins it.
Right.
So the issue facing the community is, why is this occurring and what can be done about it? The answer, in my opinion, lies in better training, better monitoring of the police. The police need to be trained not to be so subjective in a militaristic fashion when they deal with people. One of the things that you need to do as a police officer in any situation is to calm the situation. You do not calm the situation by ordering people to do something. If you say an order in militaristic fashion, what you do is you potentially offend the dignity of the person you're giving the order to. Much better to be trained and oriented and act in a lower key fashion. What's going on?
Right.
Drop the knife, please. Let's talk.
Yeah.
Not drop the knife.
Yeah.
Pull your gun out and face.
Right. Yeah.
So there needs to be a calming, more rational approach to dealing with people who potentially or realistically are even in a threatening stance.
Yeah. Well, you know, in the talks that we've had, it's fantastic. This is why I said we'd have 2 hours, we could keep on going. But we got to kind of close it up here. One of the things, you know, that I really zero in on, you personally, and you wrote this book, you are a policeman, and you have certain duties to do. And people should understand, you know, different policemen act different ways, and hopefully, and I'm saying flying high, that's our boat here. Flying High, and that's the name of our program here. And that's why Flying High, getting a person like John here to talk about his specific work and what he did, and in the FBI and what happened with Nixon in that situation and what's going on now, because that's what we need to do here, is relate as much as we can that's close to it or whatever, that will give us some ideas of what we should or should not do.
Exactly what you're talking about, Dr. Sanchez. You're talking to the individual student, you're talking to the individual citizen, and what you're saying in your motto of Flying High is always represent yourself in the best manner possible, and by projecting yourself as a member of your family, you're representing your family, the institution you're affiliated with, Chabot College here, or an individual police department, or an organization, or just yourself. But you're flying high when you're doing the very best you can in any situation to calm it, to make it positive, to back away, to do whatever's necessary so that the outcome is the best possible for everybody, and you minimize the chance for anyone being hurt emotionally and or physically.
Or business-wise, whatever it is.
Or business-wise, or business-wise, exactly. Well, the other thing that you, and I counsel this all the time when I talk with younger people, if anything happens where there's a question in your mind as to what you should do, walk away.
Okay.
Take no action yourself. Walk away. You don't have to be involved. You're not obligated, if a situation is deteriorating or turning negative with other people, to be a party to it.
So walking away can be a positive in the thing.
Walking away is a huge positive. That is an option that you always have.
Right.
You can walk out that door, you can turn and walk up the street, you can get out of the car, you can get off the bus, you can walk in the bus to another location. You do not have to be involved.
And you know, that advice is fantastic. It isn't just for a policeman to be aware of that, you know, every one of us.
Now, policeman doesn't have that choice. Policeman is obligated to run into the problem.
Yeah, right,
And
right.
to solve the problem. It's a huge difference in terms of obligation
Yeah.
between a local police officer and an average citizen. That's the big difference between the cop and the citizen. Cop has no choice. Cop goes to trouble. Cop involves himself in trouble. Cop has to solve the trouble to help people. You as the average citizen have that.
I can walk out.
I can walk.
But you know, the thing too, John, is when you get into it, you know, you can't walk, but you're into it. And that's what you're talking, that's important, how you approach it, not just say, do this, do that. But, you know, if we can talk about this, it's your approach too. So that's a biggie right there.
If you're in and you don't want to be there, but you can't get out, calm, be alert so that you don't get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Use a calm voice, no threatening motions, good judgment.
Absolutely.
You bet.
Well, listen, John, I really want to thank you for being with us again the second time, and I really wanted you here again because what you have to say is so important for us as citizens that maybe we can follow some of these things and become better citizens. Like I'm with Chabot College. I've been here for 30 years, you know, I'm retired from here, and I love the college, you know, and I want to represent it the best way I can. This station, by the way, Flying High, has been a great way for me to do that. And having persons like yourself, you know, to reveal what's going on inside of you and what you feel, you know, in your particular job. It's not just that some people look here, there it is, you know. It's not quite that. It's more you and what you're doing and what you say.
I'm honored, Dr. Sanchez, to be invited to come over and be a part of this program, not once, but twice.
Right.
I think it's a marvelous, marvelous chance to interact with you and to be a part of a great program.
Yeah.
Thank you for the invitation.
And I want to show you this book. This is The In Pursuit, written by the one and only John Mindermann. And if you get a chance to purchase this book, it's called In Pursuit by John Mindermann. That's the book. Thank you very much, and thank you for listening. I want to thank you, John, for being with us again.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it, Dr.
Maybe we'll have it
Sanchez.
3 or 4
You bet.
times.
My pleasure.